Sarah Matthews, 52, stood frozen in the corner of the elegant wedding reception hall as her sister Jennifer's words echoed in her ears. "This is my sister Sarah, the jobless loser who couldn't keep a husband or a career." What should have been her proudest moment, her only son's wedding day, had instantly transformed into a public humiliation. But Jennifer had no idea that her boss, the influential CEO Robert Caldwell, was standing right behind her, or that this cruel introduction would trigger a chain of events that would destroy her career and reputation forever. Before I continue with my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you enjoy family drama with sweet karma endings, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories of justice served. Now let's dive deeper into how my sister's cruel words at my son's wedding led to consequences she never saw coming. Growing up in suburban Boston, Sarah and Jennifer Matthews had always had a complicated relationship. Sarah, the older sister by 3 years, was the responsible one, quiet, studious, and always trying to please their demanding parents. Jennifer, on the other hand, was the golden child, outgoing, popular, and seemingly perfect in their parents' eyes. This dynamic created a foundation of resentment that would fester for decades. Their childhood home was a battleground of subtle competitions. While Sarah struggled for recognition despite her academic achievements, Jennifer effortlessly collected praise for her social prowess and charisma. Their father, a successful corporate lawyer, clearly favored Jennifer, seeing in her the confidence and charm he valued. Their mother, a former beauty queen turned housewife, doted on Jennifer's conventional beauty and social skills, often suggesting that Sarah should try a little harder with her appearance. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a refrain that haunted Sarah throughout her formative years. Every accomplishment was measured against Jennifer's, and somehow, in their parents' eyes, Sarah always fell short. Despite the painful comparisons, Sarah persevered. She graduated with honors from Boston University with a degree in architectural design, while Jennifer chose a more practical business path at a state school. Sarah pursued her passion working for a small but respected architectural firm, designing innovative spaces that prioritized sustainability and accessibility, work that brought her genuine fulfillment but modest financial rewards. Jennifer, meanwhile, climbed the corporate ladder at Caldwell Enterprises, one of the city's most prestigious financial firms. She married young to Bradley Winston, a man from a wealthy family who shared her materialistic values. They lived in an expensive house in the most desirable neighborhood, drove luxury cars, and took lavish vacations, the perfect Instagram life that Jennifer never failed to showcase. Sarah's life took a different path. She married David, a kind and creative man who taught art at a local college. They had one son, Michael, the pride and joy of Sarah's life. While their modest home and lifestyle couldn't compare to Jennifer's material success, they had created a warm, loving environment filled with meaningful connections and authentic experiences. Then came the recession of 2008. The architectural firm where Sarah had worked for 15 years closed its doors. David's position at the college was reduced to part-time. Financial strain began to take its toll on their marriage, compounded by David's subsequent health issues. After 23 years together, they decided to separate, amicably remaining friends and committed co-parents to Michael. Jennifer viewed Sarah's divorce as yet another failure. "I always knew he wasn't good enough for you," she said at the time, though Sarah knew what she really meant was that Sarah wasn't good enough for anyone worthwhile. Jennifer never missed an opportunity to highlight the contrast between their lives: her thriving career as vice president of client relations at Caldwell, her seemingly perfect marriage, her financial security. What Jennifer didn't know, what Sarah had kept private from almost everyone, was that the past 3 years had been transformative for Sarah. After losing her job, she had gone back to school, earning a master's degree in urban planning, with a focus on sustainable development. For the past 18 months, Sarah had been working remotely as a consultant for an international nonprofit organization that created sustainable housing solutions in developing countries. The work was meaningful and increasingly successful, though deliberately kept under the radar, as the organization prepared to launch a major new initiative. Sarah had also discovered a talent for historical architectural photography, building a modest but growing online following for her work, documenting forgotten buildings and their stories. Her photographs had recently been featured in a prestigious architectural journal, opening doors to new opportunities. She had chosen not to share these developments with her sister, knowing Jennifer would somehow diminish them. Michael, now 28, had grown into a compassionate and successful young man who adored his mother and recognized the sacrifices she had made for him. He had followed his passion for environmental law and recently joined a prominent firm in Boston. His engagement to Emma, a brilliant pediatric nurse from a close-knit family, had been a source of immense joy for Sarah. In the months leading up to the wedding, Sarah had poured her heart into helping with preparations, wanting everything to be perfect for her son. She had designed custom invitations, created stunning floral arrangements, and even helped Emma's mother make personalized favors for the guests. These contributions came from love rather than a desire for recognition. Jennifer, however, had contributed nothing but criticism. She questioned every choice from the venue to the menu, constantly comparing it to her daughter Melissa's wedding the previous year, which had been a lavish affair at one of Boston's most exclusive hotels. "It's a shame you can't afford to give Michael a proper wedding," she had commented during the rehearsal dinner, loud enough for several guests to hear. Sarah had swallowed her hurt and anger, determined not to let anything spoil Michael and Emma's special day. "This wedding reflects who they are," she had responded calmly. "And it's beautiful because it's authentic." What Sarah didn't realize was that Jennifer's behavior stemmed not just from her lifelong need to feel superior, but from a growing sense of insecurity. Behind the facade of success, Jennifer's marriage was crumbling under the weight of her husband's infidelities. Her position at Caldwell Enterprises, while impressive sounding, had recently become precarious as the company underwent restructuring. The perfect life she had constructed and lorded over Sarah for decades was beginning to show dangerous cracks. And so as the wedding day arrived, both sisters carried their complicated history into the elegant but modest venue that Michael and Emma had chosen. Sarah, filled with pride and joy for her son, was determined to focus only on celebration. Jennifer, threatened by her sister's evident happiness despite her failures, was poised to reassert her perceived superiority in the most public and damaging way possible. Neither sister could have predicted that the evening would end with an irrevocable shift in their relationship, or that the consequences would extend far beyond family dynamics to reshape both their futures in ways they could never have imagined. The morning of Michael and Emma's wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect October day in New England, with crimson and gold leaves creating a natural cathedral in the outdoor ceremony space they had chosen. Sarah awoke early, her heart full of anticipation and joy. She had splurged on a tasteful navy blue dress that complemented her silver-streaked dark hair and brought out the blue in her eyes that matched her son's. Sarah arrived at the venue 3 hours before the ceremony to oversee the final arrangements. The historic stone building with its surrounding gardens was transformed with simple, elegant decorations that reflected Michael and Emma's personalities, sustainable, meaningful, and beautiful, without being ostentatious. Jennifer arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in a designer dress that cost more than Sarah's monthly income. She was accompanied by her husband Bradley, who looked uncomfortable and distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. Their daughter Melissa and her husband were traveling in Europe and had declined to return for the wedding, a slight that Sarah had pretended not to notice for Michael's sake. "This place is quaint," Jennifer said as she air-kissed Sarah's cheek. "I suppose it's the best you could do under the circumstances." Her eyes traveled critically over Sarah's dress. Navy at a wedding, bold choice. Sarah bit her tongue and smiled. Michael and Emma love it. That's all that matters to me. The ceremony itself was magical. Sarah couldn't hold back tears as Michael, handsome in his tailored suit, watched Emma walk down the aisle. The couple had written their own vows, heartfelt promises that spoke of partnership, respect, and unwavering support. Sarah noticed that even Jennifer seemed moved, though she quickly composed herself when she caught Sarah looking. After the ceremony, as guests mingled during the cocktail hour, Sarah was approached by a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm Robert Caldwell." He extended his hand with a warm smile. "Your son spoke so highly of you when he interned with our legal department last summer. I wanted to introduce myself." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Robert Caldwell was Jennifer's boss, the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, and one of Boston's most influential businessmen. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Caldwell. And please call me Sarah." "Only if you call me Robert," he replied. "Michael is an exceptional young man. You must be very proud." "I am," Sarah said sincerely. "He's worked incredibly hard to get where he is." They chatted easily for several minutes about Michael, the ceremony, and Sarah's background in architecture. She found herself mentioning her current work with the international nonprofit, surprised by Robert's genuine interest in sustainable development. "We're actually looking to incorporate more sustainable design principles in our new headquarters," Robert told her. "I'd love to hear more about your perspective sometime." Across the room, Jennifer had noticed their conversation with growing alarm. She excused herself from a conversation with distant relatives and made her way toward them, her smile fixed firmly in place. "Robert, I didn't expect to see you here," Jennifer said, inserting herself between Sarah and her boss. "How do you know the happy couple Michael interned with us last year?" Robert explained. "Brightest young man we've had in years. I was just telling his mother how impressed we were with him." Jennifer's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh yes, my nephew is quite something. Sarah must have told you we're sisters." "She hadn't mentioned it yet," Robert said, looking between them with interest. "Though I can see the family resemblance now." "Half-sisters technically," Jennifer corrected her voice, taking on the slightly patronizing tone Sarah knew all too well. "Same father, different circumstances." It was a distinction Jennifer rarely made, but one she deployed strategically when it suited her purpose of creating distance. Sarah felt the familiar sting of Jennifer's subtle undermining but maintained her composure. "Jennifer has been at Caldwell for 15 years now?" 17, Jennifer corrected sharply. "I'm vice president of client relations. We just landed the Peterson account last quarter." She turned to Robert with a practiced smile. "I've been meaning to discuss my ideas for restructuring the department actually. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week." Before Robert could respond, they were interrupted by the wedding planner announcing that dinner was about to be served. As they made their way to their assigned tables, Jennifer linked her arm through Sarah's, her grip just tight enough to be uncomfortable. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she hissed under her breath. "Having a conversation at my son's wedding," Sarah replied calmly. "Is that a problem?" "Robert Caldwell doesn't attend the weddings of summer interns," Jennifer said. "He's here for a reason, and it's not to chat with my unemployed sister." "I'm not unemployed, Jennifer. I've told you about my consulting work." Jennifer let out a dismissive laugh. "Consulting? Is that what you're calling your little hobby now?" "Please, Sarah. We both know you've been struggling since David left." "David didn't leave, we separated amicably," Sarah corrected, pulling her arm free as they reached the reception hall. "And my work is actually quite successful, not that you've ever bothered to ask about it." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," Jennifer said with a smirk. "Just stay away from Robert. I have important business matters to discuss with him, and I don't need you embarrassing me." Sarah watched as Jennifer strode confidently to her table near the front of the room, strategically placed close to where Robert was seated. Throughout the dinner, Sarah observed her sister making repeated attempts to engage Robert in conversation, but he seemed more interested in the heartfelt speeches being given by Michael, Emma, and their friends. When it was time for the mother-son dance, Sarah temporarily forgot about the tension with her sister. Dancing with Michael to the song they had chosen together, the same one she had sung to him as a child, was a moment of pure joy. She caught Robert Caldwell watching them with an appreciative smile, clearly moved by the evident bond between mother and son. As the evening progressed and the formal events gave way to general dancing and celebration, Sarah found herself enjoying conversations with Emma's family and old friends she hadn't seen in years. She was feeling relaxed and happy, until Jennifer, who had been drinking steadily throughout the reception, approached with a group that included Robert Caldwell and several of Michael's new colleagues from the law firm. And it was in that moment, with alcohol loosening her inhibitions and jealousy fueling her words, that Jennifer delivered the introduction that would change everything. "This is my sister Sarah, the jobless loser who couldn't keep a husband or a career." The silence that followed Jennifer's cruel introduction seemed to stretch for an eternity. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as every eye in the small circle turned toward her. Robert Caldwell's expression shifted from shock to something harder, more assessing, while Michael's colleagues looked deeply uncomfortable. Michael, who had been approaching the group with Emma, froze mid-step. His face flushed with anger as he processed what his aunt had just said about his mother. Emma squeezed his arm gently, a silent reminder to stay calm on their wedding day. Sarah forced herself to breathe. Decades of managing Jennifer's barbs had taught her composure, even if this public humiliation cut deeper than anything before. She straightened her shoulders and met the eyes of those around her, her dignity intact despite the deliberate attempt to strip it away. "Actually," Robert Caldwell's authoritative voice broke the silence, "I was just learning that Sarah is a consultant for the Global Sustainable Housing Initiative. It's an organization our company has been following with great interest." He turned to Sarah with genuine respect. Their work in developing innovative, environmentally responsible housing solutions is remarkable. Jennifer's triumphant smile faltered. "She's just doing some volunteer work," she said dismissively, attempting to salvage the narrative. "It's not a real job." On the contrary, Robert continued, his tone pleasant but firm. "The GSHI is at the forefront of urban development innovation. They're quite selective about their consultants." He addressed Sarah directly. "You mentioned earlier that you're involved with their new Southeast Asia project." Sarah nodded, finding her voice. "Yes, I'm leading the architectural design team for the pilot community in Vietnam. We're incorporating traditional building techniques with sustainable materials and renewable energy systems." Michael stepped forward, then his protective instinct overriding wedding day decorum. "Mom is being modest as usual," he said, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Her designs were featured in Architectural Digest last month, and she's been invited to speak at the International Sustainable Design Conference in Copenhagen this fall." Jennifer's face contorted with surprise, and something that looked remarkably like fear. She laughed nervously, attempting to pivot. "Well, I had no idea little sister was keeping secrets. How interesting." She reached for another glass of champagne from a passing server. "Not secrets," Sarah corrected gently. "I've mentioned my work many times. You just weren't interested in hearing about it." One of Michael's colleagues, a young woman who had been listening intently, brightened with recognition. "Wait, S.E. Matthews, you wrote that piece on preserving cultural identity through adaptive architecture. I cited your work in my graduate thesis." Sarah smiled warmly at the young woman. "That's wonderful to hear. I'd love to hear about your thesis sometime." As the conversation continued with genuine interest in Sarah's work from those present, Jennifer became increasingly agitated. She attempted several times to redirect attention to herself, mentioning her recent successful client acquisition at Caldwell Enterprises and her daughter's travels in Europe. But her efforts fell flat against the authentic engagement happening around her. Robert Caldwell, after listening to Sarah explain some of the technical challenges of her current project, checked his watch. I should make my way out soon, but Sarah, I meant what I said earlier about our new headquarters. Would you be willing to consult on the project? We're aiming for LEED Platinum certification, and your perspective would be invaluable. Before Sarah could respond, Jennifer inserted herself between them. Robert, we already have the Davidson firm handling the architectural aspects, she said, her voice tight with anxiety. The board approved their proposal last quarter. Robert regarded her with a coolness that hadn't been present before. I'm well aware of what the board has approved, Jennifer. Davidson's handling the structural work, but we've been looking for a sustainability consultant with practical international experience. He turned back to Sarah. Think about it. Have Michael connect us if you're interested. As Robert made his goodbyes congratulating Michael and Emma once more, Jennifer followed him anxiously toward the exit, attempting to salvage what had clearly become a professional misstep on her part. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but Jennifer's increasingly desperate gestures and Robert's stiff posture suggested it wasn't going well. Michael pulled his mother into a protective hug. I'm so sorry, Mom. Aunt Jennifer had no right to say that about you. It's your wedding day, Sarah said, firmly returning his embrace. Don't waste another moment thinking about it. This is your and Emma's night to celebrate. Still, Emma added, her eyes flashing with indignation. Someone should tell Aunt Jennifer that the 1,950 seconds called and want their success means a husband and conventional career definition back. Sarah couldn't help but laugh at her new daughter-in-law's fierce loyalty. I've had many years to develop immunity to Jennifer's particular brand of sisterly love. Tonight is about joy, not old wounds. As the evening continued, Sarah made a conscious decision to set aside the incident and fully embrace the celebration. She danced with old friends, charmed Emma's relatives, and even had a surprisingly pleasant conversation with Bradley, Jennifer's increasingly detached husband, who seemed relieved to find someone who didn't expect him to maintain the facade of marital bliss. Jennifer eventually returned to the reception, her complexion blotchy and her movements stiff. She avoided Sarah entirely, positioning herself at the opposite side of the room and drinking steadily. By the time the cake was cut, Jennifer had retreated to a corner table, her expression thunderous as she watched the joyful proceedings from a distance. Sarah noticed with a mixture of concern and vindication that Robert Caldwell had not returned after his conversation with Jennifer. Something significant had transpired between them, but she was determined not to let curiosity about it detract from Michael and Emma's perfect night. As the evening drew to a close with Michael and Emma preparing for their sparkler-lined exit, Sarah found herself standing near her sister for the first time since the introduction incident. Jennifer's makeup was smudged from what appeared to be hastily wiped tears, her carefully constructed poise noticeably absent. I hope you're satisfied, Jennifer said bitterly, her words slightly slurred. You've completely undermined me with my own boss. I did nothing of the kind, Sarah replied quietly. Whatever happened between you and Robert was entirely your doing. Jennifer laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Always so self-righteous. You have no idea what's at stake for me. She grabbed her purse and stood unsteadily. Congratulations on your perfect son and his perfect wedding. At least one of us got something right. With that parting shot, Jennifer stumbled slightly as she made her way toward the exit, leaving before the formal conclusion of the reception. Bradley, who had been deep in conversation with Emma's uncle, noticed his wife's departure and quickly followed, offering Sarah an apologetic glance as he passed. Watching them go, Sarah felt an unexpected wave of sadness beneath her lingering hurt and anger. The gulf between them had never seemed wider or more permanent. Something fundamental had shifted tonight, and Sarah had the distinct feeling that their relationship would never be quite the same again. The day after the wedding, Sarah allowed herself to sleep in, emotionally drained from both the joy of Michael and Emma's perfect day and the painful confrontation with Jennifer. She woke to sunlight streaming through her curtains and the gentle ping of incoming messages on her phone. There were dozens of congratulatory texts from wedding guests and several missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Curious, she checked her email and found her inbox flooded. 3 messages stood out immediately. One from Robert Caldwell, with the subject line, "Consulting Opportunity." Another from the editor of Architectural Digest, requesting an interview. And a third from the conference organizers in Copenhagen, confirming her speaking engagement. Sarah sat up in bed, stunned by this sudden professional attention. As she scrolled through the remaining emails, a pattern emerged. Word had spread quickly among the architects and developers at the wedding about her work with the GSHI. Her unique approach to sustainable design, incorporating cultural heritage elements, had struck a chord, and several firms were reaching out to discuss potential collaborations. I know you're invested in this story now, and I'm about to reveal some major turning points. If you're enjoying this family drama as much as I think you are, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories of karma and justice. I post new content every Wednesday, and your support means everything. Now, let's get back to what happened next, because this is where things get really interesting. While responding to the most pressing emails, Sarah received a text from Emma's mother. "Thank you for raising such a wonderful son. The wedding was perfect. Also, thought you should see this." Attached was a link to a social media post. Sarah clicked on it with trepidation, finding herself looking at Jennifer's professional social media page. There, in a rambling, seemingly emotional post, timestamped 3:27 a.m., Jennifer had unleashed a bitter tirade about family betrayal and workplace sabotage. Though Sarah wasn't mentioned by name, the implications were clear. Jennifer accused an unnamed family member of manipulating a professional connection and undermining years of dedicated work for personal gain. The post had already attracted concerned comments from Jennifer's colleagues and friends, with many suggesting she remove what seemed like an unprofessional outburst. Jennifer had responded defensively, to several further digging herself into a hole by making vague accusations about favoritism and backdoor dealings at Caldwell Enterprises. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. Jennifer's public meltdown would only damage her own reputation, not Sarah's. Despite everything, Sarah didn't want to see her sister self-destruct. She tried calling Jennifer, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent a text, "We need to talk. This isn't helping either of us." Hours passed with no response. Sarah forced herself to focus on responding to the professional opportunities that had emerged from the wedding, including a thoughtful email from Robert Caldwell, outlining a potential consulting arrangement for Caldwell Enterprises, a new headquarters project. She carefully drafted a response expressing interest and suggesting a meeting later in the week. Just as she was about to send it, her doorbell rang. Sarah opened the door to find Bradley, Jennifer's husband, standing awkwardly on her porch. He looked haggard, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled. "Bradley, is everything okay?" Sarah stepped back to let him in, concern overriding the usual distance between them. "Not really," he said, his voice rough. "Jennifer's been suspended pending an investigation. She sent some unfortunate emails to Robert and several board members after the wedding." Sarah winced. "I saw her social media post. I tried to reach her." Bradley sank onto Sarah's couch, running a hand through his thinning hair. "She's not in a state to talk rationally right now. That's partly why I'm here." He looked up at Sarah, his expression pained. "There are some things you should know, things Jennifer has kept from everyone, including me, until recently." What followed was a revelation that shook Sarah to her core. According to Bradley, Jennifer's perfect life had been crumbling for months. Caldwell Enterprises had been investigating irregularities in client accounts managed by Jennifer's department. Nothing had been proven, but there were discrepancies that suggested potential impropriety, specifically that Jennifer had been inflating her department's performance numbers to secure larger bonuses. The Peterson account she mentioned at the wedding, Bradley continued, his voice low. They're actually on the verge of taking their business elsewhere because of mistakes Jennifer's team made. She's been desperate to fix it before Robert found out. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked, struggling to process this new information. Bradley looked away. Because after last night, Jennifer's convinced you're somehow behind the investigation, that you've been feeding information to Robert to destroy her career out of jealousy. That's absurd, Sarah gasped. I met Robert for the first time at the wedding, I know, Bradley said tiredly. But Jennifer needs someone to blame besides herself. And you've always been her. Well, her measuring stick. The sister who supposedly failed but always seemed happier than she was. Sarah sat back, stunned by this characterization. She's been looking down on me for years. Or looking up to you, Bradley suggested quietly. Comparing herself to you, and always feeling like she was missing something essential, despite all the trappings of success. He hesitated, then continued. There's more. Jennifer and I have been separated for 6 months. I moved into an apartment, but we've been keeping up appearances. She was afraid it would damage her professional image to have a failed marriage. 6 months, Sarah repeated, remembering all the times Jennifer had made pointed comments about Sarah's divorce during that period. Why maintain the facade? Bradley looked ashamed. Image has always been everything to Jennifer. And I went along with it, because it was easier than facing the truth. What truth? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew. That we've been living a lie for years, Bradley admitted. The perfect house is mortgaged to the hilt. The luxury cars are leased. The vacations are put on credit cards. Jennifer's been maintaining a lifestyle we couldn't actually afford because she was terrified of anyone, especially you, seeing her as anything less than successful. Sarah thought back to all the times Jennifer had belittled her modest home, her practical car, her simple lifestyle choices. All this time she was jealous of me, in ways she'd never admit, Bradley confirmed. The irony is your definition of success, meaningful work, close relationships, authentic living, is one I've come to value much more than the appearance of success Jennifer clings to. He stood looking weary beyond his years. I should go. Jennifer doesn't know I'm here. I just thought you deserved to know the truth, especially given the accusations she's making. Thank you, Sarah said, walking him to the door. And Bradley, I'm sorry about your marriage. He gave her a sad smile. Some things aren't meant to be saved. I'm starting to accept that. After Bradley left, Sarah sat in her living room, processing everything she'd learned. The image of Jennifer she'd carried for decades, the golden sister, the successful one, the one their parents had favored and the world had rewarded, was crumbling before her eyes. She was still sitting there when her phone rang. It was Michael. Mom, have you seen the email from Mr. Caldwell? His voice was tight with concern. The one about the consulting opportunity. Yes, I was just about to respond. No, the one he just sent to everyone at the firm. About Aunt Jennifer. Sarah's heart sank. What did it say? Michael read it aloud. An official company communication announcing that Jennifer Matthews had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation into potential violations of company ethics policies, fiduciary responsibilities. The email was professional and did not detail the specific allegations, but the implication was clear. Jennifer's position at Caldwell Enterprises was in serious jeopardy. There are rumors flying around the office, Michael continued. Some people are saying she misrepresented client accounts, others that she used company resources for personal expenses. No one knows for sure, but it's bad, Mom. This isn't because of what happened at the wedding, Sarah said firmly, wanting to reassure her son. Bradley just left. There's been an ongoing investigation apparently. I believe it, Michael said. Mr. Caldwell isn't the type to fire someone over a personal slight. But the timing is unfortunate, Sarah acknowledged. People will connect the dots incorrectly. Aunt Jennifer certainly has, Michael said grimly. She called me an hour ago accusing you of conspiring against her. She was not in a good place, Mom. I've never heard her like that. Sarah closed her eyes, pained by the image of her sister unraveling. Despite everything, Jennifer was still her sister. I'll try to reach her again. Maybe give her some space first, Michael suggested gently. Emma and I are worried about you getting caught in her crossfire right now. After they hung up, Sarah sat with the weight of the situation. The sister who had always seemed to have everything, the sister who had made Sarah feel inadequate for decades, had been living a lie that was now collapsing around her. And somehow in Jennifer's mind, Sarah was responsible. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. For years, she had measured herself against Jennifer's apparent success and found herself wanting. Now it seemed Jennifer had been doing the exact same thing in reverse, seeing in Sarah's simpler life something authentic that she coveted but couldn't attain. In that moment of clarity, Sarah felt the burden of their competitive relationship begin to lift. She couldn't fix whatever was broken in Jennifer that was her sister's journey. But she could refuse to play the comparison game any longer. With renewed purpose, Sarah returned to her computer and finished her response to Robert Caldwell, accepting the meeting to discuss the consulting opportunity. Whatever happened with Jennifer, Sarah would continue moving forward on her own path, the one that had always been right for her, even when she doubted it herself. 3 days after the wedding, the story broke. The Boston Business Journal published an article with the headline, "Caldwell Enterprises Executive Under Investigation for Financial Improprieties." Jennifer's name was prominently featured along with details of her 17-year career at the company and hints at the nature of the alleged misconduct. Sarah learned about the article from Michael, who called her immediately after seeing it circulate at his firm. "Mom, this is getting serious. They're saying Aunt Jennifer might have misrepresented client performance metrics to boost her department's bonuses for the last 3 years. The SEC might get involved." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Whatever her complicated feelings about her sister, she had never wished for this level of public humiliation and potential legal trouble for Jennifer. Is that confirmed, or just speculation? The article cites sources close to the investigation, Michael said. But Mr. Caldwell isn't commenting officially beyond acknowledging an internal review of certain business practices. Sarah's phone had been buzzing constantly with texts and calls from family, friends, and distant relatives who had seen the news. Most messages expressed shock and asked if Sarah knew more details, often with a barely disguised hunger for gossip. She had responded minimally, protecting what little privacy Jennifer might have left. By that evening, the story had evolved. Someone had discovered Jennifer's ill-advised social media post about family betrayal and workplace sabotage, and a follow-up article now suggested a personal element to the professional scandal. Sarah's name wasn't mentioned, but the article noted that family tensions were reportedly on display at a recent wedding attended by both Matthews and Caldwell. Sarah closed her laptop feeling sick. The carefully constructed narrative of Jennifer's life, the successful career, the perfect marriage, the enviable lifestyle, was being dismantled in the most public and painful way possible. And now Sarah's private family dynamics were becoming fodder for public consumption. She tried calling Jennifer again but still got no answer. Bradley reported that Jennifer had barricaded herself in their house, refusing visitors, and communicating only through increasingly paranoid texts, accusing various people of conspiring against her. The next day, Sarah's doorbell rang shortly after 7 a.m. She opened it to find Emma's father Thomas standing there with a grim expression and a newspaper in hand. "Have you seen this?" he asked, without preamble, handing her the paper. Sarah looked down at the lifestyle section of the Boston Globe. There, under a headline about wedding trends, was a photo from Michael and Emma's reception. The caption identified the mother of the groom, Sarah Matthews, in conversation with Caldwell Enterprises CEO Robert Caldwell, and noted that Sarah was a respected architectural consultant whose sister Jennifer Matthews is currently embroiled in scandal at the same company. They were supposed to focus on the sustainable design elements of the venue, Thomas said apologetically. Emma gave them photos specifically for that angle. We had no idea they would tie it to the Caldwell story. Sarah invited him in, trying to maintain composure as she scanned the article. While it wasn't explicitly negative, it created an undeniable link between Michael and Emma's wedding and Jennifer's professional disgrace, exactly what Sarah had hoped to avoid for the newlyweds' sake. "I'm so sorry," Sarah told Thomas. "This was supposed to be about Michael and Emma's special day." "Don't apologize," Thomas said firmly. "Emma's furious about how they've twisted this. She's already called the reporter to complain." He hesitated. "But that's not the only reason I'm here. There's been a development with your sister." Jennifer, it seemed, had finally broken her silence, giving an exclusive interview to a competing newspaper. Thomas pulled up the article on his phone and handed it to Sarah, his expression telegraphing that what she was about to read wouldn't be pleasant. Sarah steeled herself as she began to read. The interview was essentially a character assassination attempt against her. Jennifer claimed that Sarah had manipulated the situation at the wedding to ingratiate herself with Robert Caldwell, presenting herself as a victim, while deliberately sabotaging Jennifer's career. She painted Sarah as bitter and jealous of her success, suggesting that Sarah had been feeding false information to Caldwell for months as part of a calculated revenge plot. "It's complete fiction," Sarah whispered, her hands shaking as she returned the phone to Thomas. "I met Robert for the first time at the wedding. No one who knows you would believe this," Thomas assured her. "Emma and Michael are already drafting a statement, refuting the claims about your involvement." Sarah shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I don't want them dragged into this any further. This is between Jennifer and me." Throughout the day, messages poured in from people who had seen Jennifer's interview. Some expressed support for Sarah, while others, mostly those who knew Jennifer better or only knew of Sarah through Jennifer's lens, sent accusatory or questioning texts, clearly believing the narrative Jennifer had crafted. By late afternoon, Sarah had turned off her phone, overwhelmed by the barrage. She sat in her garden trying to find peace among her carefully tended plants, when she heard a car pull into her driveway. Looking up, she was surprised to see Robert Caldwell stepping out of a sleek black sedan. "I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit," he said, as Sarah met him at the garden gate. "I thought this conversation would be better in person than over the phone." Sarah invited him in, hyper-aware of the modest simplicity of her home compared to the luxury Robert Caldwell was accustomed to. Yet he seemed perfectly at ease, accepting a cup of tea and settling into her worn but comfortable living room sofa. "I've seen your sister's interview," Robert began directly. "I want to assure you that no one at Caldwell Enterprises gives it any credence. The investigation into Jennifer's conduct predates our meeting by several months and is based on substantial documentation." Sarah felt relief wash over her. "Thank you for telling me that. I was concerned that people might think that you somehow orchestrated this." Robert shook his head. "Impossible, but I'm not here just about that. I want to make it clear that our interest in your consulting work is entirely separate from the situation with Jennifer. Your reputation and portfolio speak for themselves." They discussed the potential consulting arrangement with Robert, outlining the scope of the project, and Sarah asking thoughtful questions about their sustainability goals. By the time he left, they had established the framework for a professional relationship that had nothing to do with Sarah's connection to Jennifer. As Robert was leaving, he paused at the door. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but meeting you has been illuminating. Jennifer spoke of you occasionally over the years, always diminishing your choices while positioning herself as the successful sister. Meeting you and Michael, seeing the authentic relationship you have, It puts things in perspective. After he left, Sarah felt a curious mix of vindication and sadness. The narrative Jennifer had constructed about both their lives had finally been exposed as fiction. But the price Jennifer was paying for that exposure seemed increasingly steep. A week after the wedding, with Jennifer's professional situation deteriorating further and her public attacks on Sarah escalating, Bradley reached out again. "She needs help, Sarah. She's refusing to see a therapist, she's not eating, and she's convinced everyone is part of some conspiracy against her. I know it's asking a lot, but would you consider talking to her? You're the only family member she might actually listen to right now." Sarah's initial instinct was to refuse. Jennifer had crossed lines that seemed impossible to walk back, and the public nature of her accusations had caused real damage to Sarah's reputation in certain circles. But beneath her anger and hurt, Sarah still remembered the little girl who had once followed her around, who had cried when Sarah left for college, who had, in rare, unguarded moments over the decades, shown glimpses of genuine sisterly affection. "I'll try," she finally agreed. "But I can't promise anything." They arranged for Sarah to come to the house the following morning when Jennifer would be alone. Bradley would remain nearby in case the situation escalated, but he agreed that the sisters needed space to speak privately. Sarah arrived at Jennifer's imposing colonial home, feeling a complex mix of emotions, anger, apprehension, and unexpected compassion. The perfectly manicured lawn and flawless exterior gave no hint of the turmoil within, a fitting metaphor for Jennifer's life as Sarah was coming to understand it. Jennifer opened the door looking like a shadow of her former self. Her hair was unwashed, her face pale and drawn, her designer loungewear wrinkled. The house behind her, usually immaculate, showed signs of neglect. Mail piled on the entry table, dishes stacked in the sink, visible through the kitchen doorway. "Come to gloat?" Jennifer asked bitterly, but she stepped aside to let Sarah enter. "I came because I'm worried about you," Sarah replied simply. Jennifer led her to the living room, where financial documents, newspapers, and empty wine glasses cluttered the coffee table. She swept some papers aside to make room for Sarah to sit, then collapsed into an armchair opposite. "Bradley sent you, didn't he?" Jennifer's voice was rough, as though she'd been crying or hadn't spoken aloud in days. "The loyal husband, so concerned about his poor crazy wife." "He is concerned," Sarah acknowledged. "So am I. So is Michael." Jennifer laughed bitterly. "Perfect Michael. Did you know he's been asked to join the Caldwell legal team, Robert's offering him a position as in-house counsel? The irony is rich, don't you think? My career implodes and your son gets a promotion." "Michael hasn't accepted any position," Sarah said carefully. "He's actually declined to be involved with anything related to your case because of the family connection." Something flickered in Jennifer's eyes, surprise perhaps, or a reluctant acknowledgement of Michael's integrity. She reached for a glass of water, her hand trembling slightly. "Why are you really here, Sarah? To tell me to stop talking to the press, to demand an apology, to rub it in that you've won?" "Won what exactly?" Sarah asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Jennifer, there was never a competition, not from my perspective." "Of course there was." Jennifer's voice rose sharply. "There always has been. Mom and Dad made sure of that from the beginning, comparing us, pitting us against each other. You were the smart, creative one. I was the pretty, sociable one. Two paths, two types of success." Sarah was startled by this characterization. "I always thought they favored you." "They certainly seemed to approve of your choices more than mine." "They approved of the results," Jennifer corrected, her voice bitter. "The prestigious job title, the right husband, the right address. They never asked if I was happy. They just wanted the bragging rights." She looked up at Sarah, her expression raw. "Were you happy, I mean? With your modest house and your creative career and your now failed marriage?" The question caught Sarah off guard with its directness. "Yes," she answered honestly after a moment. "Not every minute of every day, of course. There were struggles, disappointments. But overall, yes. I built a life that felt authentic to me. I raised a son I'm proud of. I do work that matters to me. I hate you for that, Jennifer whispered, tears filling her eyes. I've spent my whole life chasing something I thought would make me happy, make me better than you, and all I've done is create a beautiful house of cards that's now collapsing around me. The admission hung in the air between them, shocking in its vulnerability. Sarah had never heard her sister speak with such brutal honesty. Jennifer, Sarah said gently, what's happening with your job with these allegations? Did you actually do the things they're saying? Jennifer looked away, her posture deflating further. Not at first, she said quietly. Not intentionally. But the expectations kept rising. The pressure to outperform every quarter, to land bigger clients, to show better returns. I started making small adjustments to the numbers. Just temporary fixes until the real results caught up. She wiped roughly at a tear that had escaped. But they never quite caught up, did they? And the small adjustments became bigger ones. The temporary fixes became permanent deceptions. And now, she gestured helplessly at the papers strewn across the table, many bearing the Caldwell Enterprises letterhead. Have you gotten legal advice? Sarah asked, practical concerns temporarily outweighing the emotional revelations. Jennifer nodded. The best that money can buy, what little money we actually have left after the creditors take their share. The lawyer thinks I can avoid criminal charges if I cooperate fully with the internal investigation and make restitution. But my career is over. My reputation is destroyed. And apparently my marriage has been over for months, though Bradley only got around to telling me that after everything else fell apart. The bitterness in her voice was palpable, but beneath it, Sarah heard something else, the frightened tone of someone whose entire identity and sense of self-worth had been tied to a facade that no longer existed. You know what the worst part is, Jennifer continued, not waiting for Sarah's response. At the wedding, seeing you with Michael, watching how he looks at you with such genuine love and respect. I realized Melissa has never looked at me that way. My own daughter sees me the same way I've always feared everyone does, as someone to perform for, to impress, not someone to truly love. It's not too late to change that relationship, Sarah offered quietly. Jennifer looked up sharply. Isn't it? Melissa won't even take my calls since the scandal broke. She's afraid it will impact her husband's banking career by association. She laughed hollowly. My daughter, who I raised to prioritize image above all else, is now doing exactly that at my expense. The raw pain in Jennifer's voice touched something deep in Sarah. Despite everything, the years of diminishment, the recent public attacks, Sarah found herself moving to sit beside her sister on the couch. Jennifer, you've made mistakes. Serious ones. And you've hurt people, including me. But you're still the same person who taught Michael to ride a bike when David and I were both down with the flu. The same person who sat with Mom through her chemo treatments when I was stuck overseas on a project. You're not just the sum of your worst choices. Jennifer looked at Sarah with genuine surprise, as though this perspective had never occurred to her. For a moment, the hardened mask she had worn for so many years seemed to crack completely, revealing the vulnerability beneath. I don't know who I am without all of this, she admitted, gesturing around the immaculate but soulless house. Without the job title, the social status, the appearance of perfect success. I don't know if there's anything left. There's only one way to find out, Sarah said gently. In that moment of genuine connection, something shifted between the sisters. The competitive dynamic that had defined their relationship for decades didn't disappear entirely, but it receded enough for something more authentic to emerge, a fragile recognition of their shared history, and the possibility, however, being remote, of a different kind of future. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the atrium of the newly renovated Caldwell Enterprises headquarters, admiring how the space captured and diffused natural light through the innovative skylight system she had helped design. The building had officially achieved LEED Platinum certification, with Sarah's sustainability consulting playing a significant role in that achievement. It's even more impressive in person than in the renderings, Robert Caldwell said, approaching from behind. The board is thrilled. Energy costs are already down 17% from our projections. The true test will come with changing seasons. Sarah replied modestly, but yes, I'm pleased with how it's turned out. They walked together through the space discussing future projects and the unexpected success of their collaboration. What had begun as a consulting assignment had evolved into a more permanent arrangement, with Sarah now heading Caldwell's new Sustainable Development Initiative, a role that allowed her to continue her international work while implementing progressive design principles closer to home. Have you heard from Jennifer? Robert asked as they reached his office, the question gentle but direct. Sarah nodded. She's in Arizona. The community service portion of her settlement agreement led her to a nonprofit that builds housing on Native American reservations. She started as part of her required hours, but she stayed on voluntarily. The aftermath of Jennifer's professional disgrace had been difficult for everyone involved. After the initial shock and denial, Jennifer had ultimately accepted a settlement that required full cooperation with investigators, financial restitution, and community service in lieu of criminal charges. The terms had been strict but fair, largely due to Robert's intervention behind the scenes, a gesture of compassion that had surprised Sarah. And personally, how is she doing? Robert's interest seemed genuine, despite everything Jennifer had put the company through. Better, I think, Sarah said thoughtfully. She's living simply for the first time in her adult life. Studio apartment, used car work clothes instead of designer labels. It's been an adjustment, but there's a lightness to her now that I've never seen before. The journey hadn't been smooth. After their confrontation, Jennifer had initially retreated further, refusing help and lashing out at those who tried to offer support. The finalization of her divorce from Bradley and the forced sale of their home to cover debts had pushed her to what seemed like a breaking point. It was Michael who had ultimately reached through her defenses, visiting his aunt, despite her objections, and sharing stories of clients he'd represented who had rebuilt their lives after professional disgrace. Everyone deserves a second chapter, he had told her, even you, Aunt Jen. She sent me this last week, Sarah said, showing Robert a photo on her phone of Jennifer standing proudly in front of a completed house, surrounded by a Native American family and fellow volunteers, her face sunburned but smiling, genuinely. First time she's initiated contact in months. Robert studied the image. She looks real. More like you, actually. Sarah smiled at the observation. We are sisters, after all. As they concluded their meeting, and Sarah prepared to leave, she reflected on the extraordinary twist of fate that had brought her to this point. Her life had expanded in ways she couldn't have imagined a year earlier, with new professional opportunities, greater financial security, and a growing reputation in her field. But the most profound change had been internal, a final shedding of the insecurity and self-doubt that had shadowed her for decades. The unraveling of Jennifer's carefully constructed facade had forced Sarah to recognize how she had internalized her sister's judgments, measuring her own choices against an illusory standard that had ultimately proven hollow. Outside the Caldwell building, Sarah checked her phone to find a text from Michael: dinner tonight with Emma. Big news to share. She smiled, texting back her acceptance. Whatever their news, and she suspected it might involve grandchildren in her future, she felt profoundly grateful for the authentic relationships that anchored her life. As she walked to her car, still the practical, fuel-efficient model she'd driven for years, despite her improved financial situation, Sarah's phone pinged with another message. This one was from Jennifer. The family moves in tomorrow. Wish you could see their faces. Working on designs for the community center next. Not bad for a former corporate sellout, right? Sarah smiled at the hint of her sister's old sardonic humor, now turned toward self-awareness, rather than cutting others down. She typed back, "Not bad at all. Proud of you, Jen." 3 simple words that would have been impossible for either of them to express sincerely a year ago. Small steps toward healing a relationship that might never be close in the conventional sense but was finding its way toward something more honest than they had ever shared before. Michael and Emma's big news that evening turned out to be twofold. Emma was indeed pregnant with their first child, and Michael had decided to leave his corporate law position to join a nonprofit focused on affordable housing advocacy, inspired, he admitted, by both his mother's work and, surprisingly, by his aunt's recent transformation. "It's like seeing Aunt Jennifer find purpose in Arizona made me question what I really want from my career," Michael explained over dinner. "Making partner is impressive, but will it matter to me in 20 years the way seeing families move into homes they can actually afford will?" Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. "You've always had your priorities straight," she told him. "It's one of the things I love most about you." "I learned from the best," he replied, raising his glass in a toast to her. Later that night, alone in her home, the same modest house that Jennifer had once mocked, but that had always been a true sanctuary, Sarah sat in her favorite reading chair, reflecting on the journey of the past year. From public humiliation at her son's wedding, to professional vindication and personal growth. From a lifetime of measuring herself against her sister's apparent success, to the revelation that authenticity was the only measure that truly mattered. She picked up a small framed photo from the side table, a decades-old image of 2 young girls, arms around each other, gap-toothed smiles beaming at the camera. Sarah and Jennifer, before competition and comparison had driven them apart, before parental expectations and societal pressures had pushed them onto divergent paths. Perhaps they had needed to travel those separate roads to arrive where they were now, older, wiser, and finally beginning to see each other clearly for perhaps the first time in their adult lives. And that, my friends, is how my sister's cruel introduction at my son's wedding led to consequences she never expected, but ultimately to a kind of healing neither of us thought possible. Family relationships are complicated, aren't they? Have you ever experienced a moment of karma or justice that ended up teaching everyone involved an important lesson? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of family drama and eventual reconciliation resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that authentic living always wins in the end. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, sometimes life's most painful moments can lead to our greatest growth. Until next time.